Okay, there we go, and we are live. So hello and welcome back to the Accountancy Growth Council for week 6, which is going to basically focus on executing your SEO plan. So we've had 5 weeks up until this point, all really focused on understanding the basics of SEO and audience first organic search. And we're now moving forward to, okay, we've done all that planning, we've done all that preparation. How do we go ahead and execute on your SEO plan? So before we do anything, let's recap with some introductions of who we are. So my name is Harry. I'm the co-founder of 1225, the audience first organic search agency. And as ever, I'm joined by my co-founder, Brendan, who is waving on camera there. We worked with a number of financial services clients over the last 25 years combined. So those include PensionBee, Azet, Clio, and Blick Rothenberg. And we're running the Accountancy Growth Council. Now, pretty much everybody on this call, looking at the attendees list, has joined us for at least one session prior. But I can see there's a couple of newcomers. So just to very quickly recap the Accountancy Growth Council, and sorry for everyone who has joined for the last 5 weeks when we do this recap every time. But it is a group of 50 accountancy firms looking to reduce reliance on referrals and accelerate growth. This is a pain point that we have come to learn over the last 6 months since 1225 launched, where we grew a lot quicker than we expected, and that meant we had a very hefty VAT bill due at the end of our first quarter 3 months ago, and we didn't know what to do. So we did what many business owners and small business owners will do, which is turn to Google to try and find the answers. And what we found was pretty much the vast majority of accountancy firms were not set up to capitalize on that demand that is being generated online. We found a lot of websites, and in fact, Brendan, we're pretty much through now with the industry benchmark report, where we have audited over 200 accountancy firms, and we found the vast majority of firms that we audited are not set up to capitalize on that demand from organic search, page search, or just online activity in general. And the council is meeting every Wednesday at 10 a.m. to go through each of the steps in our SEO playbook for accountants. As I've mentioned, this is week 6. So we have 2 more weeks to go, which are going to focus on, okay, well, we're going to do the execution today, but how do we know if that execution is working? So moving into reporting is going to be a focus for the next couple of weeks. And the industry benchmark report, which I was just speaking about, will be with all AGC members by week 8. So within the next 2 weeks, it'll be with all members of the Accountancy Growth Council, and you have to have joined the Growth Council to have access to the industry benchmark report. And we mentioned this a few times. We're working on the in-person Accountancy Growth Council for the early part of next year. And if anybody's got any recommendations on venue, so Brendan, we're currently debating is, like Manchester, Birmingham, London, maybe even Northampton, like where is the best place and where is the best venue for the Growth Council event to take place. So if anybody does have any suggestions, please just drop us an email, messages on LinkedIn, and we'll definitely take that into consideration. Okay, so recap of who we are and what we do is over. The council is now in session. So the organic search playbook for accountants. Again, everyone who is a member of the Growth Council will have a copy of this. And if anybody doesn't have a copy, please let us know. It's an 8-step framework for organic search success. And we're on week 6. So step 6, which means that execution is this week's focus. Before we do that, let's do a very quick recap on week 5, which was a session led by Brendan. And Brendan, that session is now on YouTube. So if anybody did miss last week, just head over to YouTube, search Accountancy Growth Council, and those videos will come up. And obviously the most recent one is week 5 that we went through last week. And it was all about understanding that if you're beginning to invest in SEO, you need to see results fast. And to achieve results quickly, you must prioritize. So prioritization was the focus of last week's webinar. And we start that prioritization process by working on high value services. Start by identifying the key services your accounting firm offers. Now, what we have found from our auditing and from our work is that many firms out there are offering very similar services. So the services is one area, but it's who you're doing those services for that tends to be the biggest differentiator. So really focus on that being very clear. So Brendan, you put a screenshot in here as an example of our, made up, let's say for now, but maybe one day, the AGC accountants, so the Accountancy Growth Council accountants, accountancy for SEO agencies, right? So we can see there that we're clearly defining who those services are for. And if you're offering very similar services to your competitors, understanding who you do it for can be your biggest differentiator. And you want to prioritize keywords related to these services as they are likely to drive the most relevant traffic. And you would have done your keyword research in the prior steps in order for you to start going through understanding where the search volumes are and where the competition is. So we can see in this screenshot on the right-hand side as an example, we have, okay, yes, bookkeeping has the most search volume by far, but it's also the most difficult keyword to rank for. So finding that balance between search volume and competition, and also what you know your audience is going to be searching for, is going to be key when it comes to prioritization, moving that prioritization forward into effective execution of your SEO plan. And similar to making quick wins, we really want to identify the low-hanging fruit and begin content production. So one of the big things that Brendan, you and I are very keen on, and the team at 1225 are very keen on, is getting started as quickly as possible. So yes, we want to be planning, and we're happy for a bit of time lag while we do the planning, but what we don't want to do is get like the inertia of waiting. We want to get started as soon as we identify those low-hanging fruit areas with content production. So a good example here is Accountants for Small Businesses in the UK that has 3,600 monthly searches, and that competition score is relatively low. That difficulty score is relatively low. So if that is something that we were offering as a firm, that is definitely something we'd be producing content around very quickly. And this is just a little bit of, again, insight into our industry benchmark report, which is you want to focus on the buyer's journey, but you want to focus on the buyer's journey in a bit of an inverted way. So often we think about the buyer's journey as being awareness, consideration, and decision. But from what we've been able to see from our audit of over 200 accountancy firms is that there is a very big gap in the consideration stage of the buyer's journey. So we would actually place our focus on starting at the consideration stage, moving into decision stage content, so that those service pages, those individual pages that are targeting key terms, i.e. accountants for small businesses, and then finishing off at the awareness stage. Those awareness stages are going to be much more questions like what, how, why. So we would finish there and start with the consideration stage. So you're jumping around the buyer's journey a little bit. So instead of going from awareness to consideration to decision, we recommend going from consideration to decision to awareness. Now let's move on to the focus of this week's webinar, which is step 6 in our SEO playbook for accountants. So how to effectively execute your SEO plan. And from our experience, this is where SEO starts to go wrong. It sounds very strange to say that. Like we've spent, even if you did 1 week for each of the steps that we've spoken about here, you get to week 6 and it starts to go wrong. But I really like this as an analogy as well, which is it feels like you've done all this research, you spent all this time understanding what you're going to prioritize, getting to know your organic search landscape. It feels like once you get to the execution stage, that should be your time to rest. But if anything, now is your time to run, and you've just been building up to get to this stage. And we should use a principle which is vision without action is a daydream. And we want you to consider that your guiding principle as you move through the rest of the SEO playbook for accountants. So you've invested heavily to get to this stage, as I was mentioning. Now, you may not have invested heavily in terms of actual money leaving your bank account, but if you're not working with an SEO agency, or maybe you don't have a marketing team internally, and you've been doing this yourself, your biggest investment is going to be your time. And you would have spent a lot of time to get to this stage. So you've invested heavily. So you must execute to see a return on investment. So with that in mind, let's get into what we would do and how we do effective organic search, effective SEO execution at 1225. And one of our guiding principles is, yes, obviously action is the most important, but another one that Brendan, you and I are big believers in is, well, 2 things. One, SEO and organic search in itself is very simple. And the key to effective execution is keeping it simple. Simplicity is key. And if you action anything from this playbook, we want you to action this, which is remembering and executing against topic clusters. So we've spoken about topic clusters a few times now. We spoke about it in week 1 when we went through understanding the foundations of effective SEO and effective organic search. So if you haven't watched webinar number 1, I'd strongly recommend you go back through and watch that. And then as we started to move into the research and prioritization stages, we've also spoken about topic clusters. And this is what we mean when keeping it simple, is that topic clusters are the best way of visualizing effective SEO, but also just effective content marketing in general, whether you're doing paid, social, email, handwriting letters, whatever it would be. Topic clusters are the thing that should guide that and should be your strategy. So if we go into that in a little bit of detail, you can see we have this bit in blue, which is bookkeeping. We like to refer to that bit in the middle of this cluster as the pillar page. So that should be your pillar. And in this case, we've gone with bookkeeping. And you can see these numbers here. These represent monthly search volume. So in the UK, there are just over 18,000 monthly searches for the term bookkeeping. But what we'll also know from the research, and you will have this in the documentation that you've done up until this point, is those top line terms with a bigger search volume tend to be more competitive. So if you've done no SEO up until this point, the idea of ranking for bookkeeping is going to be very, very difficult. So what we need to start to do is we need to start to get into the mindset of your potential customers and understand what other questions they're searching for. And again, you'll have all of this from the research that you've done in steps 4 and 5. You can map that and visualize that into a topic cluster.
Sorry. Yeah, just a quick question on this. Nick's asked quickly, like, how accurate are search volume kind of numbers? How do you get them?
Yeah, okay, great question. So how accurate are they? Not very. Like, I definitely treat them as an indicator. So the way that we get these from our, I guess, SEO tool of choice, which is Moz. There are a lot of SEO tools out there. So we have SE ranking, for example, which is one that some of our screenshots from previous texts are taken from. You have the free tools that we've mentioned before, like Answer the Public and Keyword Planner, all the way through to more paid tools like Ahrefs and SEMrush. Now, all of them are only interpreting data. None of them have direct insight into that data. Google is obviously a bit more accurate. That is only looking at search volume from the platform of Google, right? So you have other platforms like Bing and Yahoo that should be considered. So the way that I would look at them is an indicator rather than factual reality. So if you ran this free keyword planner versus Moz versus like SEMrush, for example, they're going to be pretty close, but they probably will fluctuate by either a couple of hundred searches or a couple of thousand searches, depending on how broad that term is. So we use them as an indicator to help with prioritization rather than say gospel truth as to what people are actually searching. Cool, nice. All right. So we'd recommend building out this topic cluster and visualizing it. So Brendan, you and I were guest lecturing at Warwick University last week, and we were walking through some similar principles with the master's students there. And one of the pieces of advice that we gave them as they look to build out their websites as part of their project was, before you get started, take a pen and paper, seems very old school, but draw out what you want your cluster to be. And that's where we'd recommend you start when it comes to execution. So before you do anything to your website, draw out a topic cluster like this, and then you can start to execute. So let's walk through this in a bit more detail then. So topic clustering.
Sorry, Harry. Another question this time from Matt. You just asked, on the topic cluster, you mentioned the buyer's journey. Do you do separate topic clusters for each stage of the buyer's journey, or do you do it all in one cluster?
Yeah, great question. So the way that we think about that is the cluster is the topic, not the search intent. So your topic would be your cluster. And then you can start to see as you go through here, which is a great question, is that there are different stages of the buyer's journey to these particular pages, right? So do I need a bookkeeper? Very much within like the consideration stage, for example. But then you can go through to something like bookkeeping versus accountant, which is probably more at the awareness stage. And double entry bookkeeping, again, more consideration stage. So the way that we think about it is the cluster is the topic, so topic clusters. And then within that, you should have different pieces of content for every stage of the buyer's journey, which again, you can go through a map if you want to. So when you're doing that visual representation of your cluster, a good idea could be to either color code them or just write next to it, okay, this is the consideration stage, this is the decision stage, and so on. But yeah, really great question. So let's look at these topic clusters in a bit more detail then. So one of the big things that we're very keen on at 1225 is to, one, make things simple, but two, to understand that the core principles of marketing and organic search don't change, right? And topic clustering is a time-tested technique. So yes, there are different ways that your content can be distributed now. There are different challenges to content production. So There's more AI content being produced. People are doing TikTok and more user-generated content. But the core principle of topic clusters, that will stand throughout the test of time. So it is a time-tested technique that we know works. And this approach revolves around organizing your content into interconnected clusters. And that is probably another key piece, which is you can see these lines here. And if we go back a slide, you can see that these lines here, where we've literally labeled them as hyperlinks. What we want you to do when you're producing these pieces of content is make sure that you always have a hyperlink back to your pillar, and then from your pillar to the piece of content that you produced. So for example, let's say you create a piece of content around double entry bookkeeping. That piece of content should have a link back to your main bookkeeping page, and your bookkeeping page should have a link out to your double entry bookkeeping. And they not only improve content relevance, but they also improve the user experience, and they're a great signal to both search engines and to potential customers that you are doing your best to provide audience first content. And we know that audience first content is what will generate success for your accountancy firm. Again, we're talking a lot here about guiding principles, but another guiding principle is people buy from people. An effective execution of topic clusters is a good indicator that you are human, you are understanding how people are searching, and obviously in turn that should lead to traffic. And by organizing your content into topic clusters, you can capture the power of long tail keywords. And this again is something that has been spoken about in previous webinars. I think we have a slide that shows what we mean by long tail keywords in week 1 and week 2's webinars. So if you do want more information on that, go back through, have a look at those two. And I think I run the first session, Brett, and you run the second session, but in both we cover the power of long tail keywords. So if you want to know a bit more detail on that, reach out to us or go back through and watch week 1 and week 2 of the Accountancy Growth Council. And to implement your topic clusters effectively, you will need to use your keyword research from step 4. So this is what we mean about that heavy investment to get to this stage, which is for you to do effective execution, you need to be referring back to the previous weeks and the previous steps within the SEO Playbook for accountants. So you would have done your research in week 4. Then in week 5's webinar, we talk about how you prioritize that, and then you go through and execute it. So for this to work properly, you need to use your keyword research from step 4. So how do we go about implementing those topic clusters then? So you want to start by identifying your core topics, to stick those within the middle. So to create your pillars, those bits in blue, identify your core topics. These topics are most likely going to be the services you offer, and we would prioritize based on the ones that you want to sell more of. Then start thinking about your subtopics and pillar content. So for each of these core topics, you want to determine the relevant subtopics, which again, you would have done in your research. We want you then to go through and visualize that. And then we want to create that supporting content. So build supporting content that link back to these pillars. The pieces to explore the subtopics more are all going to be around what your audience are searching. And what we want you to do here is we really want you to prioritize what you think is going to be most important for your users and your potential customers, not necessarily the search volume. So search volume should be used as an indicator, but think audience first as you're going through these. Then we need to do keyword integration. So this is something that I think is probably the biggest shift. And Brendan, you and I have been to a few trade shows recently where we've spoken to many accountants, some within the Growth Council and some not in the Growth Council at the moment. And when we first start talking about organic search or SEO, we kind of use those words interchangeably. But when we first start talking to people about what we do and what the Accountancy Growth Council is, quite a few people that we've spoken to latch onto, it's just keywords. I just put some keywords on a page, SEO done. That is not what SEO and organic search is anymore. So prioritize user intent over keyword stuffing. Google is getting very good, and users are getting even better at understanding when a piece has been written just for the purpose of search, just for the purpose of ranking. And you can normally tell when you get to your page, let's say it's about bookkeeping, and the word bookkeeping is there 1,500 times in a 2,000 word article, right? Like, you do not want to be keyword stuffing. You want to integrate those keywords naturally into the content you're producing. And also, you want to be regularly updating your content. Now, that shouldn't turn into a chore. And this is, again, something that we've been asked recently by an accountant that we're starting to work with, is that content doesn't need to be updated every day, every week, every month, but it needs to have regular updates when you think it is right to do so. So if something has changed in the industry that is going to be important to, say, a sole trader, and you do accountancy for a sole trader, then yeah, sure, go back through and update that content. But you don't need to be updating it every day or every week just because you think updating that content is important. But what is interesting, and we're going to come onto this in a little bit, is there has been a recent piece of research done and published around how long should SEO take to see success. And within that, one of the things was looking at the anomalies. So the top 1% that grew quicker than everybody else from this piece of research. And one of the most common traits from those that grew the quickest was that their content was being regularly updated. So yes, definitely prioritize it, but don't stress about it. And let's quickly look at a real world example of topic clusters in action. And if you did watch the first week's webinar, you would have seen this. So we work with a client, Ashbury Healthcare. They are a provider of care homes and care services. And one of the pillars that we built out was their dementia care pillar. So we have dementia care as that centralized pillar, the piece in blue, and then you can see these subtopics off of it. So dementia care fees, moving into a dementia care, when to go into dementia care, and so on and so forth. And Brendan, this is your client. So what you went ahead and did is you visualized that pillar, and then you started to produce that content. So they already had this dementia care page, which we optimized. So then we started to create the pieces of content that we knew people were asking about, and also knew where potentially we had a competitive advantage. So our client has a competitive advantage around their pricing, where they can be cheaper than their competitors in some regards, because they take steps to be able to do so. And they weren't talking about that enough. They weren't providing audience first content. So we went ahead and built out those pages. And here are a couple of examples of those pages there. So we optimized the dementia care page, and we produced a new page for when should someone with dementia go into a care home. And it works. And we know this works. So you can see that the work started here, which is 4 or 5 months ago now, Brendan. So that growth has been relatively quick. This is a screenshot taken from Google Search Console looking at that pillar of dementia care. And we can see clicks, so traffic, continually going up week on week, month on month, as a result of producing content the audience needed to see and would find value. So let's quickly recap. Unless there's any further questions, Brendan, I'll jump into the recap. No, perfect. Let's go for it then. So from experience, SEO starts to go wrong when we get to the execution stage. Now is your time to run. Now is not your time to relax when it comes to seeing a return on investment from SEO. And that should be your guiding principle. And now you must execute. But you really want to keep it as simple as possible. Remember the principle of topic clusters. To implement topic clusters effectively, you need to go back and use your research and use your prioritization that you've done in steps 4 and steps 5. And you want to follow these 5 steps for success when it comes to topic clusters. So identify your core topics, identify your subtopics and pillar content, create supporting content, integrate keywords, do not stuff keywords, and focus on regularly updating content, not stress about it. So only update content when you think there is a new addition that is going to be important to the audience. Don't just update content for the sake of updating content.
Sorry, Harry, quick question. Claire has asked, how do you prioritise the core topics? Like if you've got 3 or 4 services that you offer, which one do you pick first and why?
So there are probably a couple of different ways of answering that question, and I wouldn't say any of them are necessarily right. So the ways that I would think about that are, well, where are you seeing the most inquiries from already? Because that's probably a good indicator of market demand. Another way of thinking about it is, what are the questions that are being asked the most from your existing client base? But you could also look at it from a business first perspective if you want to, and it is something that we do speak to our clients about, which is, well, what service areas are most profitable for you, or what service areas are you best at delivering? Because if you're best at delivering that service, it's probably going to lead to retention. And you're probably going to be more passionate about that service as well. So you could prioritize it based on that, or you could prioritize it based on data. So you could look at where has that sweet spot of increasing demand, but still relatively low competition and relatively low keyword difficulty. But I'd probably recommend prioritizing a nice sweet spot between what is most profitable and you are most passionate about as a firm, and those questions that your existing client base are asking. And we know that this works. Like, topic clusters are what we do day in, day out, and we continually have success through effective execution of those topic clusters. And a very quick side note before we wrap up, which is the question that we get asked all of the time. We see questions on LinkedIn flying about all of the time. If you ever attend an SEO conference, you will probably be thinking, or at least hear this question asked as well, which is, how long should SEO take? And I referred to it earlier that there has been a piece of research done, a piece of data analysis by Neil Patel and his company. So neilpatel.com. Neil Patel is very well known within the SEO industry. He produces a lot of content and has been doing so for a number of years. And what he did is he took all of the sites that he has access to. So through his companies, he has access to about 1 million different URLs. And he was able to kind of work backwards from there. So of that 1 million, only about 5%, it was actually less than that, it was 4.2% of all the websites he analyzed were actually doing SEO. So if you just start to do SEO and start to do SEO effectively, it's already putting you in the top 5%. And from our research, we can actually see it's going to be even greater than that within the accountancy industry. So if we work back on our numbers, if you're doing SEO, it's going to put you in the top 2% of all accountancy firms when it comes to online activity. That is a huge competitive advantage, and that should not be underestimated. And from the analysis, what we found is in the first 6 months, they saw an increase in organic search traffic by about 11%. So if you first start doing SEO and you're effectively doing SEO, you should expect about a 10 to 11% increase in traffic. Obviously, you could be an anomaly, you could grow quicker, but as a benchmark, you should be aiming for about 10 to 11% of traffic growth in the first 6 months. But what we need to remember is SEO will compound. The activity that you do three months ago will lead to an increase in 6 months' time, for example. And we can see that by in the second year of doing SEO activity, the pace of growth increases. So you'd expect to see about a 50% growth over the first year in your second year, which indicates the power of compounding. And everyone's going to get a copy of this deck. So if you want to look more into this research, because it is very compelling as a business case to start doing SEO, is just click on this link here, which is neilpatel.com/blog/how long does SEO take. Unless there's any other questions, Brennan, the council can now be adjourned. So very quick housekeeping then. When is the next council meeting? So the next council meeting will take place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 13th of December. So that's going to be week 7 of 8. So step 7 of 8 of the playbook. And if you missed any of these, something that I've referenced throughout, especially as you do need your keyword research from week 4, is you can go back and watch a recap on any of the sessions by going to youtube.com/@the Accountancy Growth Council. And in fact, if you just Google Accountancy Growth Council, all of those videos will come up within the featured snippets at the top of the Google search page. And we would love some feedback on these first 5 and 6 sessions. So if anybody has any feedback, or if you have any questions, or you have any suggestions for venues for the in-person Accountancy Growth Council, drop Brendan or I an email. Our email address is very simple. So it's just Harry or Brendan at 1225.io. And thank you very much. That is it. The council is now adjourned, and we look forward to seeing everybody at 10 a.m. next Wednesday. Thank you.